And to be truthful with desktop, if desktop paid a little bit more, man, I'll probably still be in desktop. So welcome to DebtFreeinIT. I'm your host, Mike. This podcast is for anyone who's looking to get into the IT industry, whether it's for a career change or you're just interested. I think you come to the right place. In today's episode, I have 5 IT career paths and what I believe to be the best certifications at each one of these paths to help you transition into tech. And as always, when we're talking about transitioning into tech, one thing we must remember is that everyone's journey is going to be a little bit different. So for some folks, you can make this transition less than a year. For some folks, it may only take you a couple of months. For other folks, such as myself, when I look back, it took me roughly about 3 years before I got my first IT position. Now, I did get a customer service job straight out of college, but roughly my first IT role, it took roughly about 3 years. And the way that I remember that is that my CCNA was about to expire as soon as I got hired at that position. So I'm saying that to say this: along our journeys, the main thing that's going to help us more than anything else is, first of all, just keep a positive mindset. For some folks, if it don't happen right away, they're going to say that, hey, this thing ain't going to work for me. But the one thing that you want to keep is a positive mindset, and also just keep throwing that resume out there. And make sure that you keep up with your skill set. Don't just forget about everything just because you done got the certification and just start applying to jobs. You also want to be ready for the interview. So like I always like to say, you need to stay ready so you ain't got to get ready. So let's get to it. So the first career path is the help desk or the IT support path. Usually when you go this route, you'll see common job titles like IT support specialist, help desk technician, help desk analyst, service desk analyst. And usually this is one of the first positions that someone may get when they come into the industry. So usually these positions, I like to say this is when we're getting our foot in the door. So the main job is to get your foot in the door at a good organization, learn that organization, then start to work your way up to whatever position you want to get to. And then when we look at the certifications to help you land one of these positions, of course, we want to mention the A+. I think that's probably the gold standard for a lot of support roles. And then also the CCST support technician from Cisco. That's a pretty new cert. It's only been out less than a year now. And then you have the Microsoft 365 Certified Fundamental Certification. And the reason I mention this is because most environments or most organizations will be utilizing Microsoft products. So almost every organization I can think of, I would say at least 7 out of 10 organizations you can name, a lot of times they're at least using Microsoft Outlook. And then also, one thing to keep in mind is that with some of these positions like a help desk or IT support, sometimes not just knowing the technical, but having those soft skills will help you out too to get in the door and transition to one of these positions. Some of those soft skills could be good customer service, being able to communicate with people, being able to communicate via email. So a lot of times email is probably going to be the primary way that you communicate once you get into the industry, because 9 times out of 10, if you're supporting a certain application, something's going on with that application, you're going to need to send out an email to update the users or either update your team or update the whole IT department. So being able to communicate via email is very fundamental, where even some organizations during the interview process, they may have you to respond to some generic emails just to see how well you can communicate via email. So that's something that's real important when it comes to the IT industry, being able to get your thoughts across, being able to update folks on what's going on with a certain application. And then also you may think that, okay, that's something that I would have to do when I get to a higher level, when I get to an administrator or engineer. That's not the case. A lot of times I remember when I was in the help desk position or when I was in the computer operations position, a lot of times if something went down overnight, you best believe that morning I had to send out their email to let all the folks that's coming on to their shift in the IT department, let them know what's going on, when the issue started, how long the issue been going on, who's looking at the issue. So I had to be pretty good with communicating via email, which for me, that being my first time and my first job in the IT industry, it took a while for me to get good at it. It's one of the things I had to practice because before that, my job was in a hosiery mill. So only communication I had to do was clocking in and clocking out. I ain't had to do nothing else. I talked to my buddies, we shoot the junk, talk junk and all that stuff, but I didn't have to send no emails. I ain't have to communicate with nobody. Only thing I had to do was go in there and clock out. So coming from that hosiery mill to now working in a organization where I'm communicating with everyone, that was totally new for me. So with this Microsoft 365 cert, it's great for learning the Microsoft products, but also just think about the soft skills that you may already have. So if you have some of those soft skills, that could help us to get one of these positions also. So at these two positions, you're usually supporting a little bit of everything, which is why I mentioned the certifications that I mentioned. You look at the A+, it's not vendor specific. It gives you a general overall knowledge of a little bit of everything. The CCST is the same way. The only one that was vendor specific was the Microsoft. And that's because, like I said, a lot of organizations will utilize Microsoft products. But overall in these roles, you're pretty much supporting a little bit of everything. So if I recall back to my operations job I had. So basically, if someone called in with an email issue, we had to troubleshoot that email issue. Now I can only troubleshoot it so far, but I had to have enough knowledge on it to troubleshoot it. If someone called in and it was a server issue, we could troubleshoot that server issue so far before we had to contact whoever is over that server. So at these positions, you get very well rounded, kind of like a generalist. So which is why some of those certifications are kind of, I would like to consider general certifications, where they teach you a little bit on everything. You'll touch a little bit on networking, a little bit on hardware. You may touch a little bit on the server side, but you're not going too deep into them. So you're just touching on it. So that's why I said that at this position, like I said, some of those general certifications, A+, CCST, and like I said, the only vendor specific will be one of the Microsoft certifications. So the next career path on my list is good old desktop support. So desktop support will always have a place near and dear to my heart. Desktop support is when I first started to actually like my job. Before desktop support, I was in operations, I was in help desk. Basically, I was on them phones. So when I got the desktop, I started to really enjoy my job. In desktop, I wasn't really tied to a desk all day. I could go out, work on PCs, go to different locations, help users, work on PCs, fix PCs. So with desktop, and to be truthful with desktop, if desktop paid a little bit more, man, I'll probably still be in desktop. So desktop support is definitely one of the career paths that you could choose to go down. So at desktop support, you'll hear common job titles such as desktop support technician, field service technician, tech support analyst, or sometimes it may just be tech support. Sometimes you may hear this called break and fix, because basically at the desktop role, you may be repairing PCs, or even if you're not repairing PCs, you may be re-imaging PCs nowadays, especially if you got enough inventory where if a PC breaks, you ain't really got to fix it. You can just go ahead and get that user a new PC. But if you don't get that inventory, yeah, you're going to be doing some breaking and fixing, so you may have to do that here and there anyway. So sometimes you hear this called break and fix, because basically desktop is the ones that's keeping the organization running, keeping the PCs running, because something's going on with a PC or sometimes a printer, things like that. Any kind of hardware, usually that's going to fall under desktop support. So that's some of the job titles you may see at this position. And then also that's a little bit of the duties that you may have at this position. And then when looking at the certifications at this position, so of course the A+ is still a must here. Some organizations, that's what they look for a desktop position, because the A+ kind of digs deep into that hardware component of the IT industry. So A+, I say, is still a good one to have here. Also at this position, you can have other certifications that may not be desktop related, and it'll still help you out within your job. So this where maybe a Network Plus could come in. I would say a CCNA, but that's probably overkill. But if someone has that CCNA, and just thinking about myself, when I had that CCNA, it was the thing that got me in the door at that help desk. So it could very well get you in the door into this desktop. Then you make your way to networking. So at this position here, like I said, it's a lot of certifications that can fall under this umbrella, but A+ is going to be the one that a lot of organizations is looking for. I can't think of another hardware certification that is strong as the A+. So this is one of the certifications. If I wanted to go the desktop route, the break fix route, I would probably start studying for my A+ certification here. So A+ is going to lead the pack when it comes to desktop roles, but other certifications would be helpful also. You know, you got Microsoft got a modern desktop administrator associate. So if you're somewhere supporting Windows devices, so just like the career before where we was talking about Office 365, most places running Office 365, most of them going to be utilizing Windows devices also. So that's something to keep in mind. But at the forefront, I would say that A+ is probably still golden here, especially if you want to just go the break and fix route. Quick pause. I'd like to introduce you to the Log Files. The Log Files is a weekly newsletter to help you start your IT career with practical advice and tips powered by yours truly. We launched it in the beginning of the year, packed with actionable advice, resources, and insights to kickstart your IT journey. The link is in the description as well as pinned in the comments, so don't miss out. Now back to the episode. So the third career path, of course, is good old networking. So networking will always stay close to my heart also. So like I said, my content is mainly from a networking aspect. You know what I'm saying? I did a couple of years in networking. And then as most of you know now, I'm a network instructor. So my hands are still dibbling and dabbling in networking. So at this network position, this is where you'll see common roles such as a network technician, a NOC analyst, and also a network administrator or a network engineer. So usually, like I always say, at this point in the game, when you get to this networking route, you want to learn the hierarchy, how most jobs is labeled and which jobs is higher than the other. So basically, that network technician is going to be the lowest. Then you move up to a network admin or a network analyst, then up to a network engineer, then on up to a senior engineer. Then some places may even have an architect or something higher than that. So, but knowing this lets us know what job titles we need to target. So it's not uncommon for someone to come in to the door at a networking role. So you may come in as a network technician, where for some organizations, a network technician here is different from a network technician over here. So at some organizations, that network technician, you may be just racking and stacking. You may be the one that's going in the closets, racking and stacking the devices, getting everything connected, and then that network administrator or that network analyst or that network engineer remotes in and configures the device. Or either you may be the one where the network engineer or network admin configures the device at their home or at their desk, give the devices to you, then you put them up, rack them and stack them, make sure everything is connected. Then y'all test out, making sure that you can remote to that device. Just make sure everything is copacetic. So at this position, like I said, that network technician is usually one of the levels that someone could get into the networking department from the outside coming in, making that transition. So it's just knowing the hierarchy of how these jobs are labeled. So that technician or admin, I could totally see someone coming in from another industry going into this position. Then also you got the NOC analyst position, you know, which is also a good position for someone making that transition. And then to help make that transition a little bit smoother, we want to look at some certifications that you could get here. So here, this is where I could say a CCST networking certification. Like I said, this is a low-level option. It could help you to land that position as a technician or something along those levels, or at least get you in the door where you can start to work your way up towards the networking position. And then also, you know, you got the CompTIA Network Plus. This may be a little bit helpful also. You know, the CompTIA Network Plus, one plus about it is that it's vendor neutral. So it's not going to just show you on one specific vendor. So it gives you an overall foundation, that overall learning foundation. But then the best certification, as we all know, is probably the CCNA. The CCNA is probably the best overall entry-level networking certification. Well, not probably. It is the best overall entry-level networking certification. So with this CCNA, like I said, it could help you to make that transition from whatever industry you're in into this networking role here. So like I said, it's not uncommon for someone to come in with a CCNA and they have not had a lower level role. So I remember some coworkers where those folks, they came in at a network admin role and they had never worked help desk before. They had never worked desktop before. They already had lower level networking roles at maybe another location, but they started out in networking where they may not went through those lower levels to make their way to networking. Where for me, I went through the lower levels, so I probably took the slow route. I went through the lower levels, then I went to networking, where some folks, they have the luxury of they coming in at a networking roles to where that way, like I said, their experience is a little bit different because you got me, for instance, where, yeah, I got 10 years of, well, over 10 years now of IT experience, but my experience ranges from operations, help desk, desktop, then networking. So I know a little bit of everything along those ranges. Where someone coming in just with networking, they've seen different environments. If they went to another job first, or if not, they come into a networking role where they learn their years of experience. Let's say they stay there 10 years. Their years of experience is all networking experience, where in the long run, that 10 years of networking experience is probably going to beat my 10 years where my experience is spread out. So like I said, everyone's journey is a little bit different. Hopefully mine ain't over yet. So like I said, everyone's journey is a little bit different, but the CCNA, I would say, is probably the best certification to get if you're trying to get into networking. So the next career path is good old cybersecurity. So you can't say networking without saying cybersecurity. Or sometimes you have to say cybersecurity first just to get the eyes and ears, and then you throw that networking in there. So at cybersecurity, this is where you're going to see job titles such as a security analyst, SOC analyst, junior cybersecurity analyst. So similar to the networking position, this is where we want to know the hierarchy of the cybersecurity roles. So for most roles, once you get past that help desk side, when you start going to desktop, you start going to server side of things, you start going to networking, you start going to cybersecurity. Most of those roles, the lower role or the lowest role, the role that you need the least experience for, more than likely is going to have technician on the end. Then the role next up to it will have administrator or analyst. Then the next roll up will have engineer, senior engineer. The next roll up will probably be architect or something along those levels. So most companies may only go to senior engineer, so they may not have an architect level. So, but with cybersecurity, it's the same thing as networking. You want to target those entry level roles. So like I said, it is possible to get started in cybersecurity without going through most of the help desk roles and some of those other roles to make it to cybersecurity. So that is possible. It is plenty of people who've went that route, and there's plenty of more people who's probably going to go that route. It just depends on the person. Depends on the person, and I'll probably say your location too. So it depends on the location you in. This is very possible. And then some certifications to get. So of course, the Security Plus is going to reign supreme here. So anyone that's trying to go the cybersecurity route, one of the first things that you'll get recommended is probably go after your Security Plus. So that Security Plus certification is similar to a CCNA certification for networking. It's like, I got a Security Plus. So say you want to go to cybersecurity without saying you want to go to cybersecurity. Hey, let me go get the Security Plus. So the Security Plus, like I said, is a good certification here. And then Google also has a cybersecurity certificate, which is kind of new, good for beginners. And also, speaking of early certification to get, Cisco also has a CCST cybersecurity, which is an entry-level cybersecurity certification that could help you to transition into this role. And then ISC Squared has a certified in cybersecurity certification. And this certification, according to their website, is actually free. So I'll include the link to it where you can go and look at this certification. And most likely, I'll probably do a video on this certification since it's free. So we're going to look at that. So that's something that could get you in the door at low entry. So you don't even got to put no money into it. So you just got to take the time out and study for it, get this certification. You know, I'm not saying it's going to guarantee a job. Nothing guarantees a job. So like I said, but it is something good to help you out with as a stepping stone, where you may get this ISC squared certification, which is free, then move on to the Security Plus. But at this level, that Security Plus is probably going to be a good barrier to entry, a good way to get inside here. And like I said, it is possible to get one of these roles from transitioning over to one of these roles without having to go through a help desk role or something along those lines. So the last career path on my list is the cloud. And at this category or at this path, you'll see common job titles like a cloud support associate, a cloud admin, then also a junior cloud engineer, or maybe a cloud engineer. And then also you'll see jobs that pertains to the vendor of the cloud too. So you may see an organization hiring for a AWS cloud engineer or a Azure cloud engineer. But at this category, look at the end of the title. It's still the same, just like networking and cybersecurity. So if you see analyst, admin, those are some of the first levels. Then you'll see engineer, senior engineer. So those are the higher up levels. So those take more experience. So find the right level to target depending on your experience. So it is possible. I think it's very possible to transition from another industry into the cloud industry, because one thing is, not that it's very, very new, but it ain't a lot of people it's probably a lot of people now, but still for your location and for your area, this is still something good to get into. So it's something that I need to get into myself. So it's something that I have on my list, to learn a little bit of the cloud, because with this, like I said, it is the future. I don't see it going anywhere. So learning the cloud, it can only be beneficial to your career. So when it comes to certifications, this is where you want to focus on whatever vendor your organization is utilizing. So if your organization is utilizing AWS, I would go down, start with the AWS practitioner cert, and then try to move on up to whichever role at my organization I want to get to. If it's networking within the cloud, I'll start going that path and start going after that certification. And then if my organization is utilizing Microsoft, then I start looking at some Microsoft Azure certifications. So they have a Microsoft Azure Fundamentals, which is their entry-level certification. Then you start to build up from there. So it's mainly going to depend on what vendor your organization is using. And then also a good one to throw in here is CompTIA's Cloud Plus, because it's vendor neutral. So this could be a good stepping stone where you get the CompTIA Cloud Plus. This is vendor neutral, not going to teach you on one specific vendor, but it's learning you about the overall cloud environment. Then from there, that may help you to start getting in the door. Then whatever place you get in at, you learn whatever organization they're using, whatever vendor they're using. If they're using Microsoft, you want to start going down that path. If they're using AWS, you want to start going down that path. If they're using Google, you want to start going down that path. So like I said, the cloud, I think, is here to stay. It ain't going nowhere. And I think now is a perfect time. Well, 10 years ago or 5 years ago, probably a perfect time to start learning it. But now is still a good time to get started. So if you're looking to transition into tech, you have a couple of different ways to attack the situation. So first, you can aim for IT support or a help desk role, then work your way up to where you want to be. Like I say, get your foot in the door, learn that organization, work your way up. Or second, you could go after a cert, like I mentioned, the CCNA or a Cert Plus or a cloud cert. And then this open doors to where now you're not just stuck at applying to those help desk or those desktop roles. You can start applying to networking roles, entry-level security roles, entry-level cloud roles. And like I said, that opens up the door a little bit more to where now you got a bigger footprint that you can leave here. So each one of these paths, none of them is wrong. None of them is the wrong thing to do. The main thing for me, I'm always concerned with getting my foot in the door. Once I get my foot in the door, I'm a firm believer of, if you're a good person to work with, if you're able to learn, you're eager to learn, you're willing to make mistakes, because 99 or 90% of the game is making mistakes. You will make mistakes. Ain't no doubt about that. But if you're willing to do all that, I'm a firm believer of once you get in the door, you'll be able to maneuver and make your way up to where you want to get. So that brings me to the end of this episode. Hopefully you found some value in this episode. If you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe. If you're on Instagram, TikTok, or Facebook, you can follow me at DebtFreeinIT. If you have any questions, you can leave me an email at debtfreeinit@gmail.com, or you can visit me at debtfreeinitwithmike.com. Other than that, I'll see you next week. Peace.